Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Delphi Economic Forum. Welcome to our session entitled Europe's Moment, Prepare for the Next Generation. We have already all experienced how the coronavirus pandemic totally changed our lives. But as the vaccination operation goes on, we can be more optimistic that the end of this difficult path will be ahead. But what would be the future? How can we really prepare a better future for the next generation? And what are the obstacles we will encounter in this endeavor? We have the honor to be joined by Mr. Declan Costello from Brussels. Mr. Costello, welcome. Mr. Costello is Deputy Director General of Economic and Financial Affairs in the European Commission. Mr. Michalis Arghyrou is here with me. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Arghyrou is the Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in Greece, SOE. Lord Francis Maude of Horsham is also here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Lord Maude is a former member of the Parliament and former minister. He is currently the Chairman and co-founder of FMA. And Ms. Julia Lendvai will also join us from Brussels. Welcome. Ms.
Thank
Lendvai
you. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Lendvai. Ms. Lendvai is head of unit in the Directorate General for Economic and Financial Affairs in the European Commission. Let's start our discussion now. I would like to start with Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello, I feel that it would be useful to clarify right at the start the EU-level economic policy and its support measures in response to the pandemic. It would be also helpful to highlight the Recovery and the Resilience Facility and the Next Gen EU program, as the European Commission is currently receiving the recovery and the resilience plans from all member states. What is the main point of this program, and how can all these plans lead to success?
Yeah, so let me begin by just recalling the latest economic forecasts which the Commission published this week. So we are now projecting, following a decline at the euro area of almost 7 percentage points last year, we're expecting a sharp recovery this year, over 4% in 2021, and again, almost 4.5% in 2022. So this is better than we had predicted only a few months ago, and we now expect the pre-pandemic real GDP level to be recovered by the end of this year. Now, one of the reasons why we've revised upwards our forecast is, in fact, we are factoring in the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Now, as you know, this is worth 672 billion euros in total, of which over 300 billion comes in the form of grants. Now, in our latest forecast, we have assumed that the plans will be adopted, that the funds will start to flow, and that the investments will be undertaken. And it's still an assumption because we're still finalizing the plans, but the forecast assumes that 140 billion euros worth of grants will flow to our member states this year and next year, and that would have a positive impact on growth of about 1.2 percentage points over the projection period. Now, Greece is one of the largest beneficiaries of the funds from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. The plan has been submitted, and not unusually, but it has requested the full allocation of grants, plus, as Alex Padelis was explaining before, also the loans to support business investment. So that's 18 billion in grants and almost 13 billion in loans. So the economic impact of that is actually, will be significantly larger. So already, for example, we would expect in the course of 2021, the amount of funding would be around 1 percentage point of GDP, rising to almost 2% of GDP. And what's going to be critical there is actually the quality of the investments and the absorption capacity. Maybe just a quick word on the number of member states. So far, 14 member states have formally submitted their plans to the Commission. And of that, that amounts for 284 billion euros in grants out of a total of 312. So let's say in terms of the grants, the bulk of the requests are coming in. We've had requests for about 151 billion euros in the forms of loans. Now, only 5 countries have requested loans, of which of Greece. We are now currently, there's a 2-month assessment period going on. So we would expect, given that plans came in towards the end of April, we would expect to be able to issue our assessment in the second half of June. And then hopefully the Council and Member States can approve that within 4 weeks. So I think we're on a good trajectory, but the potential impact of this is quite large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. And Mr. Arghyrou, we have Greece 2.0. This is a Greek recovery and resilience plan already submitted to the European Commission. And what are its main features and how it can help to enhance growth and employment? And are you optimistic about this? And if yes, is that optimism grounded?
Thank you. Indeed, it is a very big opportunity for Greece, and indeed it is a big opportunity for the European economy. Concentrating on Greece, naturally, after a big crisis like the pandemic, a fiscal push is always welcome to restore economic activity. But in the case of Greece and Europe, indeed, it is much more beyond that. Now, let me give you the main philosophy of our program. Before the pandemic, if you see the performance of the Greek economy, was one of low growth for the past 3 or 4 decades. And then you ask why? Why Greece over the last 30 or 40 years did not achieve high growth rates? Why did not achieve good labor market outcomes? It typically had higher unemployment than its peers. And why inequalities in Greece increased? And the answer is that because the country seemed to have lacked the ingredients of growth. The ingredients of growth, as you know, are basically investment, capital produces, high participation rates in the labor market, labor force produces, and productivity was low. So when you identify these employment, investment, and productivity gaps, you say you need to correct those. So this is a very basic but quite powerful approach. And this is precisely what the program tries to do. It tries to correct those determinants that were not at so good shape, even before the pandemic. And to do that, the Greek government before the pandemic had sought the advice of the Nobel laureate Professor Pissaridis and his team. They did a great job, and they produced an independent growth plan for the Greek economy. We also had the recommendations from our Commission colleagues in the form of the European semester, national country-specific recommendations. And of course, the Greek government was elected on a reform-oriented program. And the surprising and good thing is that these 3 approaches are overlapping to a large extent. So the Greece 2 Recovery and Resilience Plan is applying those policies that have been implemented elsewhere with great success. It is a very mainstream economic program. What it tries to do is that it tries to sort out the microeconomic side. It tries to implement reforms and investments that will achieve those things that were not achieved over the previous 3 or 4 decades. And indeed, we are optimistic that it will be successful. We are optimistic that it will achieve real convergence. The quantitative estimates that were provided by the independent study of the Bank of Greece confirmed that the program is in position, has the capacity to deliver higher growth rates, increased employment in the order of approximately 200,000 new jobs. And very importantly, those output and employment gains are projected to be permanent. And this is mainly the result of the reforms and the increase in productivity. So obviously the question is, all right, it is a good plan, and on paper it is projected to deliver good results. Will it be implemented in practice? And the answer is, I believe, yes. And if you ask me why, what is the main reason, is that A, this is a program that the Greek authorities have full ownership. It is one that has been produced by Greece. Of course, we have had the benefit of very good cooperation with our European Commission colleagues. but it is a Greek program. We have the ownership. And beyond that, and even more importantly perhaps, I think that there is here ownership on behalf of Greek society. And I think that over the last 10 years, there has been a lot of changing attitudes in Greek society. And that is how I personally interpret the result of the last general election. I think that the Greek electorate has given to the government a mandate to go ahead with reforms, and this is what this program tries to do. We try to do in Greece things that have worked elsewhere with great success, no magic solutions, just mainstream economics, and we are quite confident that it will be a success.
That was a very interesting remark about the ownership of this program. Thank you very much, Mr. Arghyrou. Lord Maude, what are the financial challenges for the governments, and are there any particular obstacles in fiscal policies? What do you think about?
Well, I was very struck by the comments made, and first of all, I should congratulate Michael and the whole government in Greece for producing at such speed, such a comprehensive plan. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge achievement to assemble this and to meet the to meet the Commission's deadline for submitting it. So many congratulations to the government in doing that. Look, it's a commonplace that every government in the world is facing a double crisis, a crisis of obviously a health crisis, but an economic crisis with the downturn they're facing, but also a public finances crisis, because every single government has seen its revenues fall and its expenditure having to rise to meet both the business support but also and human support, but also the healthcare costs. And that's so the ongoing crisis is something that no government has ever faced before, and it's going to place extraordinary demands on the government. But as we all know, the old saying, don't let a good crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to drive reform, both structural economic reform, and there's so much of that in the Greek resilience and recovery plan, but also the need for reform in how governments operate, and governments need to operate. I mean, clearly, no matter what starting point you have in terms of your views on economics, obviously, pursuing a counter-cyclical fiscal policy is essential, and there'll be fine judgments later on about the inflection point from when you start to move away from this expansionary and interventionist approach, which every government is, in one way or another, is going to be pursuing towards the point of starting fiscal consolidation and the move back towards fiscal balance. That's going to be a very fine judgment, and it'll be different in different places. But of course, for every government, again, whatever your view, the role of state intervention is going to be crucial. And there is no view anywhere where you can just say, well, we'll leave all this to the market. And so the importance of spending and the funding which the Commission is providing, the communities, the Union is providing, is crucial. And I was struck by the comment that Declan made about the importance of how the funding is absorption. And you know, the word I would use is implementation. I've been in government on and off for longer than I like to think about, 35 years. But my view is that working out what to do is rarely easy, but it is only 10% of the challenge. 90% is how do you make it happen? How do you implement projects effectively? And this plan has a myriad of different parallel projects being run, and implementation is going to be crucial. And most governments, and because so much of this is investment projects, where there's going to be a need to procure partners to deliver these projects, procurement, which is an unsexy subject. There's no glamour attached to procurement. But in most governments, procurement isn't done very well. It's done by following a process. I used to talk about it being done by procurocrats, people for whom process is king. And what's crucial is to inject into procurement processes commercial capability. In the UK in 2010, when I had responsibility for this, I found that procurement was being done in extraordinarily inefficient ways and impractical ways. It was blamed, as things often were, on the EU procurement rules, but actually when I looked at it, we were massively overloading ludicrously restrictive practices onto how it was done in ways that made it impossible for smaller and newer businesses to participate. And that was damaging both in terms of the value of what the government got for the money it was spending, but also in terms of the domestic economy. And so procurement is one of those things which is going to be absolutely crucial. And in terms of financing, it's that and project and effective project management. Again, where most governments can do this better, is going to be crucial to liberating the funding, the match funding, the private sector funding that's going to be crucial to leverage up the funding from the EU.
Thank you, Lord Maude. Ms. Lendvai, a very interesting question is how the Commission sees the policy challenges for Greece in general and, of course, in the light of the pandemic, and which are the priorities for economic policies going forward.
Yes, thanks very much. And I must say that much has been said by the speakers before me and by Alex Patel. It's just our session. Let me start with this. Of course, last year saw a big slump in economic activity, and this was in line, or actually a bit less than expected, which is, of course, due to the structure of the Greek economy, which relies heavily on tourism. And I do hope very much that the vaccination campaign and the planned reopening will allow for a decent tourism season this year. I actually also hope to participate physically in Delphi next year to this Congress. Now, on the positive side, the support measures that were adopted by the government progressively and for a temporary period seem to have helped to cushion the shock on the economy, which is very positive. The unemployment, which is very high, of course, did not surge again. And also it seems that, for instance, the bridge schemes for households and the recently adopted one for companies seem to cushion the impact of the phase out of the moratoria on debtors. And this is all very important. Also, on the positive side, we expect the return of the GDP to its 2019 level already next year. Now, the big challenge ahead is in the short term, and as also Lord Maude said it, and Peter Spiegel referred to us as the budget cutters from Brussels, but I do have to say that it will be important to phase out the support measures when and as the situation allows it. Now, this is not only because of the Brussels fiscal rules, but it's for a more fundamental purpose of the debt sustainability, of course. The other big challenge, and I will focus more on that, is to ensure long-run growth. And as Declan has already presented, the EU has been mobilizing a substantial amount of quick support this time. And the Recovery and Resilience Facility will amount to around 10% of GDP only in grants to Greece, and another 6.8% of GDP in loans. Now, this is, of course, compared to 1 year's GDP, and it will be spent over 5 years probably. But if I'm taking this and add up the cohesion and other social funds available, and also the SMP and ANFA income equivalents, which are still being transferred to Greece by the European member states, this could amount to close to an annual 5% of GDP of EU funds, which is a huge amount of money, and it will be critical to grab the opportunity and to spend this money well. Now, what do I mean by spending the money well is, of course, first of all, to invest in areas that enhance the economy's productive and human capital. Of course, the RRF has pretty strict prescriptions where the money can be invested, with 37% having to go to green transition and 20% to digital transition, with strict rules how this is calculated. It could be even higher shares of the investment amounts. This is, of course, badly needed in the entire world and in Europe, and definitely also in Greece. The program also gives big emphasis to human capital, education, social policies, which is also fundamental, I think. And as was mentioned by Alex Patelis in the previous session, I also think that unlocking private investment will be as important as the public investment itself. Now, as Lord Maude just mentioned, I also think that strengthening the absorption and implementation capacity in Greece will be critical. Now, in this sense, the recently adopted public procurement law is a very good step forward, and the implementation of the national strategy will also be, of course, very important, and this will take several years. But as we know, many of the public projects in Greece get mired in lengthy litigation processes around public procurement. So fixing this would be a big first step towards using this money well. And then strengthening the implementation capacity at all levels of the government is, of course, essential. Now, for the central planning, we are also very positive about the strategic project pipeline and the project preparation facility that are being set up currently. I hope it can be, the legal amendment can be adopted in the coming weeks. And then finally, of course, it will be essential to flank all these investments with a strong reform agenda. And since this has been already discussed and presented by Mike, I don't want to go into too much details. I think that building a reform agenda on a report that was prepared by reputed economists and including Nobel Prize winner Professor Pissarides is a very good start. And of course, as Michael said, this also organically builds on past reforms that were started in the past years. I would emphasize a few of them. I would emphasize education and skills reforms, which is crucial to build up to increase labor productivity in the future. Healthcare, of course, as we have seen in the current crisis, is a very important area, and we are looking forward to the primary healthcare reform, because, again, investments in this area will need to be accompanied by reforms to ensure that the money is spent in an efficient way and not just spent and going down the drain. Very important also business environment reforms, and since there will be many digital investments, these need to be accompanied by simplification of procedures, which will then really help unlock the effect of these investments. And of course, continued modernization of public administration, increasing the efficiency of the judicial sector, which is coming out in every single survey as the biggest obstacle to investment in Greece. These are all essential reforms, and these are all parts of the plan. Now, final remark is, of course, changing attitudes, and all these reforms take a long time to bear fruit, to implement first and to bear fruit. But I am optimistic in the sense that investor sentiment and investments depend a lot on signaling. So once the government shows determinedness to start these reforms, this gives the signal, and this already attracts investment, which then leads to growth and which then allows the economy to enter into a positive spiral. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lendvai. We have to conclude our session, and I'll give you just a few seconds each for last words. Mr. Costello.
No, thank you. I think I think the key, really the key thing is implementation. There's two fundamental elements there. One is the investment pipeline, where we have been working a lot with the Greek authorities on the pipeline, also through the provision of technical assistance, and secondly, public procurement, and avoiding the traditional blockages which have taken place, often linked to litigation. What's positive, I have to say, though, is there's a strong governance structure put in place to deliver the Recovery Resilience Facility. Michael Arghyrou is a member of that, and I think that gives us cause for optimism. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. You were very accurate. Mr. Arghyrou.
Thank you. So I will conclude with a remark of reflection. As you know, this year marks the 40th anniversary of Greece's accession to the EU. And I just wanted to offer the remark that here we are talking about a big opportunity. We have had very good comments. Declan just made a very important one regarding implementation and the other panelists. But often we forget to think in terms of the counterfactual. Imagine how more difficult Greece's position would have been under the present crisis if Greece was not given the opportunity of these funds to reform and recover. And I think that this is something that we should always try to remember, the benefits of Greece's participation to the European Union and the benefits of international cooperation in general, including our British friends, is very important, especially during periods of crisis.
Lord Maude.
Well, just to re-emphasize how impressed I've been with the content of the plan that the Greek government has created, but also just to pick up Declan's point about the governance structure, we know that this is a huge task, and it has to be driven and led from the center of government, and certainly the conversations I've had while I've been here show the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister's office closely interlinked together, and that's essential to make this work. And what will be needed in terms of implementation capability is to try to break away, and this is true of every single government I've worked, certainly the UK government, but other governments I work with now, where the implementation capability tends to be sliced up in the different silos, whereas these are recognizably the same disciplines, the same technical capability wherever they appear in government, and they need to be more integrated than they are to create something much more like a functional model rather than the silo model, which is the way most governments are, purely by dint of history, the way they're structured.
Thank you. Ms. Lendvai, just 30 seconds, please.
Okay, nothing much to add. I think continued implementation will be key, and this has always been the Achilles heel of the Greek programs in the past. So I hope that the strong ownership of the government will help in this respect.
Thank you all. I feel that our discussion was fruitful, and I'd like to thank all our honored speakers and, of course, all people working for the Delphi Economic Forum. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned in the Delphi Economic Forum, as the agenda is extremely interesting.